All right, Deuteronomy chapter 9. Let's call this one Fish Story and maybe subtitle it His Story as opposed to history, going back to the old adage that sometimes history can become his story, meaning depending upon the person who's telling it, the single truth of what happened can vary quite a bit, much like a fish story. What's a fish story? Well, if you're not from fishing territory or you're not familiar with that term, it's basically understanding how a fisherman can sometimes retell the story of either how big the fish was or how big the fight was, especially if you don't have the actual fish to measure by. Sometimes a fish can grow in the retelling of the story, thus a fish story. And likewise, same thing with his story. And why are either of those relevant? Because Moses is going to say, as you remember this portion of your history, be careful that each one of you, at least the guys, not make it his story or his perspective on what happened in one particular way. He's going to say it's not because of your righteousness. And he's going to take them back through this tale in a way that reminds them of what it was actually like. First and foremost, you were really scared. They were really big. You were like the sons of Anak, the Anakim. They were reputed as giants, it seems. And the people of Israel were pretty frightened at the prospect of having to go and deal with them. And so, as you said, back in Numbers 14, to the tune of wanting to turn around and go back to Egypt, a place that they actually hated. But they thought that would be better than having to go and face their giants. Second of all, he's going to say, you are a stubborn people. And he's going to point out 3 different points in their history that prove this. Verse 12, he's going to say, then the Lord said to me, arise, go down quickly from here, for your people whom you have brought out of Egypt have acted corruptly. They have turned aside quickly. And when Moses runs down the mountain, this is at Mount Sinai, when he's getting the law, having fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, he's going to get to witness it himself in verse 16, where it reads, and I looked, and behold, you had sinned against the Lord your God. You had made yourselves a golden calf. You had turned aside quickly. And so just as God had told them, he got to see it. And now he's reminding them, this is what it was actually like. You weren't righteous. You turned aside quickly, which required him to fast for another 40 days. So in verse 17, I took hold of the 2 tablets and threw them out of my hands and broke them before your eyes. Then I lay prostrate before the Lord as before. 40 days and 40 nights. I neither ate bread nor drank water because of all the sin that you had committed in doing what was evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. For I was afraid of the anger of the hot displeasure that the Lord bore against you, so that he was ready to destroy you. And so he had to suffer again. He's reminding them that. And then finally, he's going to sum it all up in verse 24 by saying, you have been rebellious against the Lord from the day that I knew you. And so remember the actual history, so that in the retelling, each one of you does not get tempted to simply tell his version of the story, making the fish seem a lot bigger than it was when you went in and took the promised land. Fast forward to today. It's one thing for us to get into the habit of stretching the story and telling fish stories. That can be innocent enough. It's still not a good habit to get into. But tactically, we are in a time where sometimes we can be tempted to let the passage of time give us the opportunity to retell a story in a way that is tactically to our advantage. And the danger in that is the word says in the very end of the Revelation, be careful, because locked out of the eternal promised land are those who love and practice falsehood. And so just as Moses warned the people about the danger of their individual spins on what happened as they went into the promised land, James is going to talk about the difficulty we have with taming the tongue, as we mentioned before, understanding that even when we want to do the right thing, it can be tough to tell the story the right way. But even more, the Revelation is warning us as we try to enter the eternal promised land, God has no room for our tendency to either love or practice falsehood. So my prayer for you is my prayer for me, that God willing, to the degree that we struggle to tell the story right, that he have mercy with us and that we submit to his guidance into learning how to tell the story right. But to the degree we require a taste for telling it wrong for tactical advantage, God willing, we'll let that go, because he has warned us that loving and practicing falsehood in no way fit with the eternal promised land, which is why we say his best to you as you go forward in him.